On September 15, 2023, the police showed up at a house in Essex County near Chelmsford, England. For months, neighbours had noticed some pretty strange behaviour from the homeowners, a couple in their 70s and 71. The two of them hadn't left the house or received any visitors in ages. But people would see shadows moving around inside the house like someone was pacing back and forth. At first, everyone thought it was just them being cautious due to health issues or the pandemic, but the truth turned out to be a whole lot darker. Things took a turn when their 36-year-old daughter opened the door to the officers. Her statement was caught on the police body cam and quickly went viral. The details of what happened shocked the whole country, including even the most seasoned detectives. Virginia McCullough, born in 1988 in Essex, was the youngest of 5 sisters. Her childhood seemed normal, except for the tense relationship she had with her sisters, who all described her as a compulsive liar, quirky, and socially awkward. As she entered her teenage years, her rebellious side started showing, running away from home and smoking constantly. By the time she became an adult, the differences between her and her sisters became even more obvious. While her sisters got married, had kids and moved out, Virginia stayed living with her parents. In 2017, Virginia got fired from her waitress job and started staying at home all the time. She didn't have any friends and only interacted with her parents. Despite claiming to have health issues like benign cysts that needed treatment, she started asking her parents to help her out more and more. In 2018, she told them she got a job working as a web designer from home, but the reality was she wasn't working at all. She took over managing her parents' finances, and they didn't question it. They thought she was set for a bright future. The truth, though, was that she had no job and spent most of her time gambling away her parents' money on online betting sites. During this time, Virginia lost around $21,000 in gambling, racked up huge credit card debts in her parents' names, and when they started getting suspicious about the financial issues, she forged documents to cover up the mess. Things took an even worse turn when she started asking for loans, claiming her company had been hit by cyber attacks, even going so far as to create fake emails from financial authorities. Meanwhile, the family kept up the appearance of living a peaceful, normal life. Things seemed to be under control on the outside, but inside, Virginia was getting deeper into a financial mess. Her parents, John and Lois, were unaware of the true extent of the situation. Virginia continued to take advantage of them, manipulating their trust. She convinced them that she was handling everything for their good, all while spending their money on things like online gambling. She even managed to convince them that her life was going well. They believed she was making money with her web design job and that she was on track to become a successful artist, something that she said would bring financial benefits to the family. In reality, Virginia was living off her parents' pensions, spending huge amounts of money on online betting sites and hiding it all from them. Between June 1, 2018 and September 14, 2023, she was able to siphon off more than $59,000 from her father's state pension and another $76,000 from his teacher's pension. She even spent $21,930 on gambling, showing that her addiction was taking control. But despite her constant spending, she didn't buy any flashy luxury items. She wasn't interested in appearances, just in feeding her addiction. To keep up the charade, Virginia would often communicate with her parents, friends, and family, pretending to be them in text messages and even on phone calls. She made excuses for their absence, claiming they were away on vacation or dealing with health issues. Her sisters never suspected anything. She even sent birthday cards and gift checks in her parents' names, successfully fooling them into believing that everything was normal. But by June 2019, things started to unravel. Virginia's behavior began to get weirder. The neighbors noticed that the elderly couple hadn't been out in public for a while, and their windows were always shut. People started to get suspicious, especially when Virginia started acting odd. A grocery store clerk, Paul, started noticing more strange behavior from her. She told him that her parents had moved out, but Paul didn't believe her at first. Still, he thought it was a little strange when she started coming into the store multiple times a day and then disappearing for weeks at a time. Then, during one of her visits, she casually told Paul that the police were looking for her because they thought she had killed her parents. At first, Paul was concerned, but he quickly remembered that Virginia was known for her eccentric and sometimes strange behavior, so he just brushed it off. But it wasn't long before things took an even darker turn. Virginia went on to tell him that she was pregnant, but her neighbors quickly realized that it was just a ruse. She had stuffed something under her clothes to look pregnant, but no one believed it. Her odd behavior continued throughout 2023. Virginia kept making excuses for her parents' absence, pretending they were away on trips, and even started telling people that her father had died. In August 2023, she told one of the local TV repairmen, Alan, that she needed to cancel the TV rental because her parents had passed away. Alan found the whole thing strange but didn't press her about it. Virginia continued living in the house, carrying on with her strange behavior, and still spending her parents' money on gambling. Then on August 18, 2023, the police were called to the house after Virginia claimed she had been attacked in the backyard. When they arrived, she invited them in and spoke about the alleged attacker. However, nothing came of the accusation, and the police left. But the neighbors were getting more and more concerned about the elderly couple's strange behavior. Nobody had seen John or Lois in months, and things didn't seem right. The police eventually started an investigation after John and Lois's doctor became suspicious. The doctor had been trying to get in touch with the couple for months because they had missed several medical appointments. Virginia had always made up excuses for why they couldn't make it, even picking up prescriptions for them. This was very unusual for John, who had health issues that required regular medical attention. After the doctor contacted the local authorities, they began investigating the disappearance of the elderly couple. On September 13, 2023, the police called Virginia to ask where her parents were. She claimed they were away on vacation and would be back in October. But the officers didn't buy it. On September 15th, they obtained a search warrant for the house. When they arrived, Virginia opened the door and immediately said, "I know why you're here." She pointed toward a small mausoleum she had built and said her father was hiding in there because she had killed him. The officers were in shock. Virginia calmly suggested they head to the kitchen to talk. Once seated, she confessed that she had also killed her mother and that her body was in a closet upstairs sealed away. The officers proceeded to search the house, and sure enough, they found what she had described. John's body was found in a makeshift grave made of concrete blocks and sleeping bags. Lois's body was found hidden in a closet upstairs, wrapped in sleeping bags. Virginia then led the police to the weapons she had used, a knife and a hammer. Both were found in the house, and the police were able to confirm that she had used them in the killings. When Virginia was arrested, she showed some remorse, but seemed strangely calm. She told the officers that she knew this day would come and that she deserved whatever punishment she would get. She even said, "At least you've caught the bad guy." After Virginia's arrest, the investigation continued, and the details that emerged were chilling. It soon became clear that her actions had been meticulously planned for months, perhaps even years. During the investigation, it was revealed that Virginia had been preparing for the murders since 2019. She had been gathering prescription medications over time, purchasing a knife and tools to crush and mix pills, planning her father's death first. According to her confession, she had mixed the crushed medications into alcoholic drinks, such as wine and brandy, to poison her father. John was the first to fall victim to her scheme. The morning after John's death, Virginia feared that her mother might find out what had happened and contact the police. She realized she needed to act quickly. She grabbed gardening gloves, a kitchen knife, and a hammer, and went upstairs to her mother's room. Her mother, Lois, was lying in bed listening to the radio, unaware of what Virginia had done. According to Virginia's own description, she stood in the doorway and observed her mother, who appeared innocent as she relaxed. Virginia claimed she hesitated, unsure of how to proceed. For a while, Virginia couldn't bring herself to strike her mother. She paced back and forth, doubting whether she could go through with it. However, after several moments of hesitation, she finally gathered the courage to hit Lois with the hammer. Lois, surprised and confused, turned and asked her, "What are you doing?" At that moment, Virginia struck her mother several more times, but Lois was still alive. Virginia described how, as she hit her mother, it felt like an out-of-tune violin being played poorly, an unsettling and unnatural experience. Virginia continued to struggle with her emotions, doubting herself as she tried to kill her mother. She said she wasn't sure whether the hammer would be enough to finish the job, so she ran out of the room, removed one of her gardening gloves, and grabbed a knife. She returned to her mother's room and stabbed Lois 8 times. After the final blow, Virginia held her mother's hand as she passed away, apologizing for what she had done. When Lois was gone, Virginia kissed her mother's hand and said she was sorry. At that moment, she seemed to realize the magnitude of what she had done. She wandered around the house in a state of shock and later claimed she went to see her doctor, saying she had cut her finger while chopping vegetables, even though the injury actually came from the attack on her mother. The horror didn't end there. Virginia didn't immediately call the police or confess to what she had done. Instead, she continued with her life as if nothing had changed. She went to a local store in Chelmsford, where she bought plastic gloves and sleeping bags using her father's credit card. She then went back home and created the makeshift grave for her father's body. She sealed the room off, building the structure with concrete blocks and the sleeping bags she had bought earlier. She also hid her mother's body in a closet upstairs, wrapping it in another sleeping bag. For the next few years, Virginia lived in the house with her parents' bodies hidden away, acting as if they were still alive. Over the course of the following 4 years, Virginia continued to deceive everyone around her. She used her parents' identities to get more money, using their credit cards, and even pretending to be them in phone calls and messages. She sent birthday cards and checks in her parents' names, covering up their deaths with fake excuses. She even managed to convince people that her parents had moved away. Most of the time, she pretended to be John and Lois, maintaining their social lives and fooling their friends and family into believing they were alive. Virginia kept up this lie for almost 4 years, all the while living off her parents' pensions. Between June 1, 2018 and September 14, 2023, she accumulated more than $59,000 from her father's state pension and an additional $76,000 from his teacher pension. She spent much of it on online gambling, losing thousands of pounds. At the same time, she continued to cover up her fraudulent activities, making sure that no one noticed the empty house or her increasingly bizarre behavior. The situation only started to unravel when Virginia's neighbors became more suspicious. They hadn't seen John or Lois in public for months, and Virginia's behavior was becoming more erratic. Neighbors noticed her strange patterns, frequent visits to the local store, disappearing for days, and strange comments she made to people like Paul, the local grocer. It all became too much to ignore. The neighbors grew concerned, especially after Virginia claimed she was pregnant, but no one believed her. Her belly was just a lump under her clothes, and the more she tried to act normal, the more people started to question her. On top of that, Virginia started making bizarre claims. She told a local TV repairman that her parents were dead, and that the police were looking for her because they thought she had killed them. She also cancelled a TV rental abruptly, using strange excuses, like saying her parents were no longer around. Her actions became more erratic, and people were starting to piece things together, questioning whether Virginia was truly telling the truth. Eventually, her behavior became too much to ignore. In August 2023, Virginia contacted the police claiming she had been attacked in her backyard. However, when the officers arrived, they found no evidence of any assault. The situation seemed odd, and by then, neighbors and even local store owners were starting to believe that something was seriously wrong. Virginia's lies were starting to unravel, and even the people closest to her were beginning to realize that something wasn't adding up. By September 2023, the authorities were fully involved, and the case was growing more disturbing by the day. The truth about what had happened to John and Lois was finally starting to emerge, but the questions about Virginia's actions were still mounting. How could someone live with the bodies of their parents for almost 4 years without anyone noticing? How had she kept up the charade for so long, deceiving everyone around her? It all began to unravel when the local doctor who had treated John and Lois noticed something suspicious. He had been trying to get in touch with them for months, as they had missed several medical appointments. Virginia had made excuses for their absences, claiming they were too sick to go or that they were out of town. But John, who had serious health issues, needed constant monitoring and care. It seemed impossible that he and Lois would miss so many appointments without good reason. The doctor grew increasingly concerned and decided to contact the local authorities, sparking the beginning of an investigation. On September 13, 2023, the police reached out to Virginia, asking her where her parents were. She told them that they were away on vacation and they would return in October. She also claimed that they hadn't taken their cell phones with them because they didn't know how to use them. The police didn't believe her story, so they obtained a search warrant for the Mollick family's home. On September 15, 2023, the police arrived at the house, and when Virginia answered the door, she immediately told them that she knew why they were there. In a chilling moment, she pointed to a room where she had created a makeshift mausoleum and admitted to killing her father. She calmly suggested that the officers go to the kitchen to talk, and once seated, she confessed that she had also killed her mother, whose body was hidden in a closet upstairs. The officers were left speechless as they realized that Virginia had been living with her parents' bodies in the house for nearly 4 years. As the officers began searching the house, they found what she had described. John's body was found in a crude grave made from concrete blocks and sleeping bags. Lois's body was discovered hidden in a closet upstairs, wrapped in a sleeping bag. The details of what Virginia had done to her parents were horrific, but the investigation didn't stop there. Virginia then led the police to the weapons she had used in the killings, a knife and a hammer. Both were found in the house, and forensic investigators confirmed that they had been used in the murders. When Virginia was arrested, she showed some remorse, but there was no denying the coldness of her actions. She seemed almost detached as she told the officers that she knew this day would come and that she deserved whatever punishment was coming her way. In an eerie display of calmness, she said, "At least you've caught the bad guy." The details of the murders, the lies and the deception were staggering. The more the investigators dug into Virginia's past and her actions, the more they realized just how deeply she had manipulated everyone around her. Not only had she murdered her parents, but she had also spent years hiding the truth and using their identities to continue living a life of fraud and deception. She had forged documents, faked phone calls, and sent messages pretending to be them. She even sent out Christmas cards and birthday gifts, keeping up the pretense that everything was normal. Her lies didn't stop with her parents. Virginia continued to deceive her friends, her neighbors, and even the authorities. She had faked multiple interactions, using technology to pretend that her parents were still alive. She had even convinced the local grocer, Paul, that her parents had moved away. At the same time, she was gambling away her inheritance, and she continued to live in the house with the bodies of her parents for years. As the investigation continued, authorities uncovered the full extent of Virginia's fraud. She had been living off of her parents' state pensions and other benefits, using their credit cards to fund her gambling addiction. Between 2018 and 2023, she siphoned off more than $130,000 from her parents, all while pretending they were alive. She used their money to pay for her gambling habits, online shopping, and even other fraudulent purchases, all while continuing to live in the house as if nothing was wrong. She had made up stories about her parents being ill or away, and no one suspected the truth. The deception continued right up until the police arrived. Even though neighbors had grown suspicious, they didn't know the full extent of Virginia's lies. When the police asked her about the whereabouts of her parents, she made up elaborate stories to cover up the fact that they were dead. It was only after the authorities pushed further and obtained the search warrant that the shocking truth was revealed. Now, the authorities were faced with the grim task of uncovering just how much of Virginia's story had been fabricated and how long the deception had gone on. They learned that the murders had been premeditated and that Virginia had planned the killings for several months before finally acting. Her confession revealed the cold, calculated nature of the crime. She had killed her father first, using a combination of poison and violence, and then killed her mother when she realized her mother might find out the truth. The case continued to shock the public, and soon the media picked up on the details of the crime. People were horrified by the idea that someone could live with their parents' bodies for years without anyone noticing. The fact that Virginia had faked so many interactions and lied to everyone around her made the crime even more chilling. As the investigation continued, the focus shifted to understanding the psychological motivations behind Virginia's actions. Forensic psychologists and investigators worked tirelessly to dissect her behavior, her confession, and the circumstances surrounding the murders. It became clear that Virginia had orchestrated a plan to financially benefit from her parents' death and avoid the consequences of her mounting debts and fraudulent activities. Her confession revealed that her primary motive was financial gain. Virginia had lived off her parents' pensions for years, even using their credit cards to fund her gambling addiction. The fact that she had been living in the house with their bodies for years, continuing to spend their money, showed how far her deception and greed had gone. According to experts, Virginia had a severe emotional detachment from the reality of her actions. Her ability to maintain the lie for so long and deceive so many people pointed to a deep emotional dysfunction. The case shocked the entire community, as people who had known Virginia for years couldn't believe the truth about her. They described her as a strange but harmless woman who often made odd comments and behaved eccentrically. Many had no idea about her dark side, and those who did see her as a little off didn't suspect she was capable of such heinous acts. Virginia's seemingly normal outward appearance, mixed with her eccentric personality, allowed her to deceive everyone into believing her story for years. As investigators dug deeper, they also found that Virginia had created a fake life for herself online. She had pretended to have a career as a web designer, even though she didn't have a job. She used her parents' money to fund a fake persona, presenting herself as a successful artist and businesswoman. She constantly fed this image to her parents, who believed in her success. But in reality, Virginia had no stable job and was spending all her time on online gambling, losing large sums of money. Her manipulation wasn't just confined to her parents. Virginia had been deceiving her sisters and friends for years, convincing them that everything was fine and that their parents were simply enjoying life in isolation. She even convinced them to believe that John and Lois had moved to the coast. Virginia kept up this lie, not just to protect herself, but to continue her lifestyle without anyone suspecting what she had done. In the courtroom, Virginia's defense lawyers tried to paint her as someone who had suffered from severe mental health issues, including a personality disorder. They argued that her behavior was a result of emotional abuse she allegedly suffered from her parents, as well as her struggles with depression and possible autism spectrum traits. However, the prosecution pointed out that these were not valid excuses for her actions. They argued that while Virginia's mental health struggles may have contributed to her behavior, they didn't justify the cold-blooded murder of her parents. During her trial, Virginia's demeanor remained unsettlingly calm. When the details of her confession were read in court, she showed little emotion, almost as if she were detached from the gravity of her actions. At one point, when the judge read out the specifics of her crimes, she appeared unfazed while others in the courtroom were visibly shocked. Virginia seemed more concerned with the consequences for herself than the devastation she had caused to her family. She had no visible remorse, and the fact that she had continued her fraudulent activities for years after the murders spoke volumes about her character. On December 1st, 2023, Virginia pleaded guilty to the two murders. Despite her admission of guilt, she still seemed unemotional about the crimes. The court set the date for her sentencing, and people from all over the country followed the case with growing disbelief. Virginia's ability to deceive, manipulate, and ultimately kill her parents for financial gain had stunned everyone who knew her. But it wasn't just the murders that shocked the public. It was the sheer audacity of her actions, the way she continued to live her life as if nothing had happened, while hiding the truth from the world. As Virginia faced her sentencing, the prosecutor argued that her actions were premeditated and driven by a deep desire for money. She had carefully planned the murders, using poison to kill her father first, and then turning to violence to end her mother's life. The fact that she had hidden the bodies for 4 years, living in the same house as them, showed how far her depravity had gone. On February 5, 2024, Virginia was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum sentence of 36 years before she could be considered for parole. The judge, in his ruling, emphasized the cold and calculated nature of the murders. He stated that Virginia had not acted in a moment of crisis, but had instead murdered her parents for financial gain, showing a complete lack of empathy for the people who had raised her. The judge also noted that her prolonged abuse of her parents, both financially and emotionally, was a clear violation of the trust that should exist between parents and children. In his ruling, the judge pointed out that Virginia's actions were not just a result of mental illness or abuse, but were driven by greed and manipulation. He described her as a person who was willing to go to extreme lengths to cover up her crimes and maintain her lavish lifestyle. The judge also noted that Virginia had never shown genuine remorse for her actions and had continued to lie and manipulate others throughout the investigation and trial. Virginia's family, especially her sisters, were devastated by the outcome. They had never suspected their sister could do something so horrific, and they were left to deal with the aftermath of her actions. In a statement after the sentencing, they expressed their shock and disbelief, stating that they had been unable to comprehend the magnitude of Virginia's betrayal. They spoke about the pain of losing both their parents and their sister in such a violent and senseless way. In the aftermath of the sentencing, Virginia's case became a focal point in discussions about family dynamics, financial abuse, and the dark potential that can sometimes lurk behind seemingly ordinary individuals. Experts began to analyze Virginia's behavior more closely, pointing out the combination of psychological factors that contributed to her actions. Some argued that her lack of empathy and her ability to continue living a lie for so long were indicators of a deeply troubled personality. Others suggested that Virginia's behavior might have been exacerbated by her mental health struggles, though this didn't excuse her actions. For the public, the case raised important questions about the nature of trust within families and the lengths some people will go to for financial gain. It also highlighted the importance of vigilance in recognizing signs of manipulation and financial abuse, especially when the perpetrators are trusted family members. Many were left wondering how someone could live in the same house as their parents' bodies for so long, going to great lengths to maintain the illusion of normalcy while committing such heinous acts. Meanwhile, Virginia's defense team, although they had argued that she had suffered from emotional trauma and possible mental health disorders, continued to stress that her actions weren't entirely her fault. They pointed to her history of emotional abuse from her parents, as well as her struggles with depression and possible autism spectrum traits. But the prosecution strongly countered these claims, arguing that these were not valid excuses for taking two lives. They emphasized that the premeditated nature of the murders and the cold, calculated way in which Virginia carried them out demonstrated a clear lack of remorse and responsibility. Despite her guilty plea, many questioned whether Virginia fully understood the gravity of what she had done. Her lack of emotional response during the trial and sentencing only deepened this uncertainty, while her defense team maintained that she was suffering from significant emotional and psychological issues. Others argued that she was simply a manipulative and opportunistic individual who had taken advantage of her parents' trust for years. As Virginia began her prison sentence, the family continued to process the shock of what had happened. The loss of their parents was devastating enough, but the realization that their own sister had been responsible for their deaths was almost too much to bear. Virginia's sisters struggled to come to terms with the fact that they had been deceived by someone so close to them for so long. The betrayal was painful, and it was clear that the damage done to the family would be long-lasting. In the months following the trial, Virginia's case remained in the media spotlight, with new details emerging about her life and the extent of her deceit. Reports continued to surface about how she had manipulated everyone around her, creating an elaborate web of lies that had allowed her to live a life of fraudulence and excess. Experts speculated that Virginia's actions were a result of a combination of personality traits, financial desperation, and emotional detachment. The case also sparked a wider conversation about how we perceive mental health and how it intersects with criminal behavior. Some questioned whether Virginia's lack of empathy could be attributed to a deeper psychological issue, while others argued that her actions were a conscious choice driven by greed. The debate over how to handle such cases, where mental health issues might be at play, but where the crimes committed are undeniably heinous, continued to evolve in the aftermath of the trial. Ultimately, Virginia's case serves as a tragic reminder of the darkness that can hide behind a facade of normalcy. While the Mollick family tried to move on from the horror of what had transpired, the scars left by Virginia's actions would linger for years to come. For the public, the case raised more questions than answers. How could someone so close to their family, someone who was supposed to be a caregiver, commit such an atrocity? What drove Virginia to such extreme lengths to cover up her actions and continue living in the house with her parents' bodies for years? As Virginia serves her life sentence, society continues to grapple with the complexities of human behavior, the boundaries of empathy, and the chilling reality that sometimes the greatest betrayals come from those we trust the most.